The taxi driver and the single mom CEO. Ethan, a humble food delivery driver, never imagined his life would change when he rescued a stranger from the street. Sophie, a powerful CEO and single mother, never expected her savior would be someone society saw as beneath her. Their worlds couldn't be more different. He lives paycheck to paycheck, she runs a fashion empire. But something about that night lingers, something neither of them can ignore. As their lives slowly intertwine, sparks begin to fly. But reality isn't a fairy tale. Can love truly cross the line between social status and circumstance? What happens when a little boy asks for a father, and his mother starts to believe it's possible? Will they choose each other, or will fear and expectations tear them apart? Find out in this heartwarming story of love, sacrifice, and what it really means to build a family. It was a gray Friday evening in Seattle. The sky hung low, and a steady drizzle painted the city in melancholic hues. Office buildings spilled out workers with umbrellas and coffee cups in hand, rushing toward bus stops or ducking into Ubers. Ethan Cole, 24, was wrapping up his last delivery of the day. He zipped through the side streets on his worn-out bike, his weathered windbreaker clinging to his back. Working for a food delivery app barely paid the rent for his cramped basement studio, but it was honest work. His mom, back in Spokane, was dealing with mounting medical bills, and Ethan sent most of what he earned back home. Turning onto a quiet street near Capitol Hill, Ethan slowed. Something didn't feel right. A small crowd had formed near a bus stop. Curious, he pulled over and removed his helmet. A woman, probably in her late 20s, lay crumpled on the wet pavement. Her clothes were muddy, and a toppled electric scooter lay beside her. She wasn't moving. "Has anyone called 911?" Ethan asked quickly. A few people looked at each other, avoiding eye contact. One man mumbled, "Didn't want to get involved. Might be a lawsuit or something." "Seriously?" Ethan frowned. She could be in serious trouble. No one answered. So Ethan stepped forward without hesitation, crouched beside her and checked her pulse. It was there, weak but steady. "Hang on. Okay?" he whispered, more to himself than her. With surprising ease, he lifted her and gently laid her across the back of his bike, securing her as best he could. It was only a 10-minute ride to Harborview Medical Center, but every second felt like a lifetime. Raindrops needled his face as he maneuvered through traffic, repeating, "Just hold on." Almost there. At the hospital, he burst into the ER with her in his arms. "She was in an accident," he panted. "I didn't see it happen, but she was out cold." Nurses took over immediately. Ethan stood dripping in the lobby, unsure whether he should stay or go. He was soaked to the bone, but somehow he didn't feel cold anymore. After what felt like hours, a doctor finally emerged. "She has a fractured arm and some bruised ribs, but she's stable. You got her here just in time." Ethan exhaled, finally letting his shoulders drop. A nurse offered him a cup of coffee, which he took gratefully. He lingered for a while, unsure if he was even allowed to be there. Eventually, a voice called from behind, "Excuse me, you brought her in, right?" Ethan turned to find a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as the patient's aunt. "I'm sorry we're late getting here." "Thank you. You probably saved her life." "I just did what anyone would have done," Ethan replied modestly. Not everyone would have. Once he was sure the woman was in good hands, Ethan slipped away without another word. The rain had stopped, but puddles still lined the street. As he walked back to his bike, water sloshed in his sneakers, but his chest felt strangely warm. 2 days later, as Ethan sat on his beat-up couch after a long shift, his phone buzzed. A number he didn't recognize. He hesitated before answering. "Hello?" "Hi. Is this Ethan Cole?" "Yeah. Who's this?" "I'm the girl you helped the other night," the voice said gently. "My name's Sophie Reyes. I just wanted to say thank you. My aunt told me what you did. I don't even remember most of it, but you probably saved my life." "Oh, wow. Hey, yeah, I'm glad you're okay." There was a pause. Then, "I know this might be a bit awkward, but I'd really like to meet you. Thank you in person. Would that be okay?" Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "I mean, you don't have to. Really, it's no big deal." "It is to me," she said. Her voice had a sincerity he couldn't ignore. He smiled a little. "All right, where should I meet you?" "There's a cafe called Maple and Birch near the hospital. Do you know it?" "Sure. What time?" "Tomorrow at 3? Yeah, okay. I'll be there. He ended the call and stared at his phone for a long moment. He didn't know it yet, but that simple coffee meeting would change his life in ways he never imagined. The next afternoon, the skies over Seattle had cleared, and sunlight spilled through the windows of Maple and Birch, a cozy indie cafe nestled near the hospital district. The place had a warm, woodsy interior, mismatched chairs, and the comforting scent of cinnamon and espresso. Ethan arrived 10 minutes early, nursing a glass of iced tea by the corner window. He wore his cleanest flannel shirt and a pair of jeans that were just slightly frayed at the cuff. He ran his hand through his unruly hair for the fifth time, his nerves building. At 3:02 p.m., the bell over the cafe door jingled. She walked in. Sophie Reyes looked nothing like the disoriented, mud-covered figure he'd carried through the rain. Today, she wore a cream sweater tucked into high-waisted slack, her dark hair neatly styled. A soft smile lit up her face when she saw him. "Ethan?" she asked, her voice softer than over the phone. He stood up quickly. "Hey, yeah, that's me." They sat across from each other. Sophie ordered a lavender tea, then reached into her bag and carefully pulled out a small gift box. "This is for you," she said, sliding it across the table. Ethan blinked. "Oh, you didn't have to." "I know I didn't, but I wanted to. Please open it." Inside the box was a custom-made keychain, a tiny hand-stamped silver plate with the words "Everyday Hero" engraved on it, along with a simple drawing of an umbrella. Ethan chuckled. "You think I'm a hero?" "You showed up when no one else did," she said simply. "I don't know if that's what heroes do, but it's enough for me." He looked down at the keychain again, then gently closed the box. "Thanks." "Really?" They talked for a long time, longer than either of them expected. Ethan told her about his delivery job, how he left college after his mom's cancer diagnosis, and how he sometimes rode through the rain just to make ends meet. Sophie listened intently, eyes warm but unreadable. When the conversation turned, he asked, "So, what about you? What do you do?" She hesitated. "It's complicated," she said, stirring her tea. "I work in fashion." "Like retail?" "Not quite." She offered a small smile. "I run a company, Reyes Atelier. It's a fashion startup that grew faster than I ever imagined. We have a design office in Portland, a showroom in LA, and a team in New York." Ethan blinked. "Wait, you're that Reyes? The one that got featured in Forbes last year?" Sophie gave a sheepish nod. "Guilty." He let out a low whistle. "Wow. I mean, I knew you were sharp, but damn." She laughed, clearly enjoying his unfiltered reaction. "I didn't say anything earlier because people treat you differently when they find out. But I guess you earned the full truth." Ethan leaned back, letting that settle in. "I'm just a guy on a bike. You're a CEO with a fashion empire. That's quite the gap." "There's no rule that says we can't have coffee," she replied, tone light but firm. "And for the record, that guy on a bike probably saved my life." They left the cafe together as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Outside, the city buzzed with early evening energy. Sophie walked a few steps in silence, then turned toward him. "I know it's strange, us meeting this way, but I'm glad we did." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Me too." She hesitated. "This might sound forward, but would you have dinner with me this weekend? At my place?" Ethan looked surprised. "Dinner?" "Nothing fancy, just home-cooked food. I'd really like you to meet someone." "Someone?" Sophie nodded. "My son." There was a pause. "You're a mom?" he asked, more surprised than judgmental. "Yes. His name is Leo. He's 6. I'm a single parent. His dad passed away a few years ago." Ethan processed this, his eyes softening. I didn't know. I'm sorry." "Don't be. I just wanted to be honest with you. I never expected any of this to happen. Getting hurt, meeting you, having coffee. But now that it's happened, I don't want to hide any part of my life." He took a breath, then smiled. "Okay, yeah, I'd love to meet him." Sophie looked genuinely moved. "Saturday night?" "Sure." They stood there a moment longer, in the middle of a busy street corner, the world moving fast around them. But between them, everything felt still and quietly hopeful. Ethan rode home that night with the keychain in his pocket and something else in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Saturday evening came with a gentle spring breeze and the scent of barbecue drifting through the Seattle suburbs. Ethan parked his bike in front of a modern townhouse in Queen Anne. The house had a cozy front porch lined with potted lavender, and warm lights glowed from the living room window. He took a deep breath before ringing the bell. Sophie answered in jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair loosely tied up. She smiled wide. No makeup, no filters, just her. "Hey," she said. "You came. Wouldn't miss it." From behind her, a tiny voice shouted, "Mom, is he here?" A second later, a blur of energy burst into the room. "Hi, are you Ethan?" the boy asked. Ethan laughed. "That's me. And you must be Leo?" "I made you a drawing," Leo announced proudly, thrusting a piece of paper into his hands. It showed a stick figure Ethan with a big smile, holding an umbrella in one hand and a pizza in the other. The title at the top read, "My Mom's Hero." Ethan looked up, genuinely touched. "This is awesome. Thank you." "You like tacos?" Leo asked. "Mom made fish ones and chicken ones. I helped with the salsa." "Then I know it's going to be amazing." Dinner was simple, but perfect. Homemade tacos, chips with guac, and sparkling lemonade. Leo talked nonstop about dinosaurs, his favorite video games, and how he was learning to read Captain Underpants. Ethan listened with full attention, asking questions, laughing at all the right moments. He was a natural. Sophie, across the table, watched in quiet amazement. She hadn't seen Leo connect with someone this fast, especially not a grown-up. And Ethan, with no effort, was present. Not polite, not patronizing, just real. Over the next few weeks, what started as a thank you visit turned into something more. Ethan started helping out when Sophie had late-night Zoom meetings or needed to pick up samples from the warehouse. Sometimes he'd swing by to walk Leo home from school. Other days, he'd just stop by to say hi and maybe stay for dinner. There was no grand confession, no sparks flying in dramatic slow motion. It wasn't fireworks, it was sunlight. Quiet, steady, and real. One afternoon, Sophie and Ethan took Leo to Gasworks Park for a picnic. Leo was off chasing seagulls with a juice box in hand, while the adults sat watching the lake shimmer under the sun. "You know," Sophie said, poking at her sandwich, "you don't have to keep helping us like this." Ethan shrugged, looking out at the water. "I'm not helping. I like being here." She studied his face. "Even though it's a little complicated?" "You're a single mom and a badass entrepreneur. That's not complicated. That's impressive." She laughed softly. "You always know exactly what to say." "Nope," he smiled. "Just always mean what I say." Their eyes met, and for a moment there was silence. Comfortable, familiar, and charged. Later that week, Ethan was hanging out in the living room while Leo showed off his new Lego police station. Sophie came in with a basket of laundry and leaned on the doorframe. "Hey," she said, voice tentative. "Leo's been asking about you a lot." "Oh? Yeah. He keeps saying stuff like, 'I wish Ethan was here when something funny happens,' or 'Do you think Ethan would come to my school play?'" Ethan smiled. "That's sweet. I like spending time with him." Sophie nodded slowly. "I like spending time with you too." He looked up. "Sophie, I don't know what this is between us, but I know I feel something when you're around, and it scares me because I thought I shut that part of me off a long time ago." Ethan stood, walked over, and took the laundry basket from her hands. "I'm scared too," he said honestly, "but not enough to walk away from this." Sophie's eyes welled slightly. "Then stay." "I was never planning to leave." A few nights later, after dinner, the three of them curled up on the couch watching Finding Nemo. Leo snuggled into Sophie's side and halfway through the movie turned to Ethan. "Hey, can you be my dad?" Both Sophie and Ethan froze. Leo continued, totally sincere. "You're already here all the time. You laugh at my jokes. You made pancakes. That's basically what dads do, right?" Ethan's throat tightened. Sophie blinked, trying not to cry. He gently put a hand on Leo's shoulder. "That's a really big question, buddy. I think we should talk to your mom about that, don't you?" Leo nodded. "Okay, but I hope she says yes." Sophie glanced at Ethan, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then, with a soft, trembling smile, she whispered, "I hope I do too." That night, when Ethan returned to his apartment, he didn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Leo's question echoing in his head. "Can you be my dad?" It wasn't a question about biology. It was a question about commitment. About choosing to stay, to show up, not just today, but tomorrow, and the day after that. Ethan had spent most of his life trying to survive. But now, maybe, for the first time, he was ready to live for someone else. It had been 3 days since Leo asked, "Can you be my dad?" And Ethan hadn't stopped thinking about it. He wasn't afraid of loving them. He already did. He was afraid he wasn't enough. Sophie ran a nationally recognized fashion label. She had investors, employees, and contracts worth more than he'd ever seen in his life. Ethan, on the other hand, still wore secondhand sneakers and delivered takeout to pay rent. The disparity gnawed at him. Not because she made more money, but because she had purpose. She had built something, and he was still figuring himself out. That weekend after dinner, Sophie caught him staring off in thought. "You okay?" she asked. Ethan gave a half smile. "Yeah? Just thinking." "About Leo? About you. About what it means to really be there for both of you." She reached out and took his hand. "You're already doing that?" He shook his head. "Not the way I want to. I need to build something. Something that makes me feel like I'm not just tagging along for the ride." Sophie sat back and studied him. "What do you want to do?" He paused, then answered with surprising clarity. "I want to learn how to run a business." Sophie didn't laugh. She didn't blink. She just said, "Then I'll teach you." And she did. Every night after Leo went to bed, their living room transformed into a mini MBA classroom. Sophie walked him through logistics, budgeting, brand identity, customer psychology. Ethan took notes like his life depended on it. In the mornings, he was back on his bike, still delivering food, but now with earbuds in, listening to business podcasts and audiobooks instead of music. While waiting for orders, he read blog posts and watched YouTube lectures on marketing and leadership. He started shadowing Sophie's meetings, quiet at first, just observing, then slowly asking questions, offering suggestions. She introduced him to her staff, not as her boyfriend, but as a colleague in training. To his surprise, many were kind, even encouraging. "You've got good instincts," said Harper, her COO. "Reminds me of Sophie, back in the early days." A few months later, Sophie was preparing to launch a new capsule line for the fall season. Minimalist athleisure with eco-friendly fabrics. The pitch meetings with boutiques in Portland and Austin were crucial. Sophie turned to Ethan one evening and said, "I want you to run the Austin pitch, alone." Ethan stared at her. "Are you serious?" "I am. You know the product. You've been in the meetings. I've seen how people respond to you. They trust you." He swallowed. "What if I screw it up? Then we learn from it. Together." He flew to Austin with a laptop, mock-ups, and a bundle of nerves. He returned with a signed deal and a bulk order. That night, back in Seattle, they celebrated on the back patio with beer and grilled burgers. Leo fell asleep in a blanket fort inside the house, surrounded by stuffed animals and empty juice boxes. "You did it," Sophie said, raising her bottle to Ethan. "We did it," he replied. "No," she said, eyes serious now. "You did." There was a pause. Then Sophie said softly, "You know, I used to think I'd have to do everything on my own forever. After Leo's dad passed, I built walls I didn't even realize were there. But you didn't knock them down. You just stood outside them until I opened the door." Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. "I didn't come here to save you, Sophie. I came because you saved me first." 2 weeks later, Harper called an emergency staff meeting. Sophie stood at the front of the room and Ethan sat in the back, expecting a standard quarterly update. Instead, she announced, "I'm stepping back from day-to-day operations." The room buzzed. "And I've asked Ethan to step in as director of retail strategy." A hush fell over the team. Then applause. Ethan felt his chest tighten, not with fear, but with pride. Later, as they walked home, he said, "Are you sure about this?" "I've never been more sure," she replied. "You've worked for it. You've earned it. And more than that, I trust you." Ethan stopped on the sidewalk, looking at her under the soft yellow glow of a street lamp. "I want to spend my life proving you right." Sophie smiled. "You already are." Back home, Leo was waiting on the couch, eyes heavy with sleep. "Hey, champ," Ethan said, crouching down. "Did you get the job?" Leo mumbled. Ethan grinned. "Yeah, I did." Leo hugged him around the neck. "Good. You're like the best Ethan ever." He nodded, heartful. "Thanks, buddy. And now you have to come to career day." Sophie laughed from the kitchen. "You're committed now," she teased. Ethan looked at both of them, the flickering light of the TV dancing across their faces. "I've never wanted anything more." It was a chilly November morning in Seattle when Ethan officially moved in with Sophie and Leo. No moving truck, no Instagram post, just a suitcase, a guitar, and 2 boxes of books he'd collected over the last year, mostly business, a few fiction, and one coloring book Leo insisted he keep. He set the boxes down in the front hallway. Sophie appeared from the kitchen, coffee in hand. "You sure about this?" she asked, half teasing. Ethan stepped forward and kissed her forehead. "Been sure for a long time." From the living room, Leo shouted, "We saved you the good cereal." Ethan grinned. "That settles it then." Their life together wasn't perfect, and they didn't pretend it was. There were weeks when Ethan worked late, balancing new responsibilities at Rhea's Atelier's growing West Coast expansion. There were nights Sophie stayed up worrying about her brand's shift into sustainable fashion and how to protect her team during volatile times. But now they had a rhythm. They had each other. Leo adapted better than either of them expected. He started calling Ethan Dad without fanfare, just one morning at breakfast, in the middle of a sentence about school lunches. Ethan nearly dropped his toast but said nothing, just smiled and reached for more orange juice, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sophie noticed. She always noticed. On a cold Saturday in January, the three of them drove out to Discovery Park. It had become their favorite tradition, one they stuck to even when Leo pretended he was too big for nature walks, but always ended up climbing every rock in sight. After a picnic lunch of peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, they sat together on a driftwood log, the waves gently crashing behind them. Sophie leaned into Ethan's shoulder. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" "No," he said, "but I'm glad we did." She reached into her coat pocket and handed him a small envelope. Inside was a handmade card, drawn in crayon. It read, "My family, Mom, Dad, me, with 3 stick figures holding hands, and a house, and a tree." Ethan blinked. "Leo made this?" Sophie nodded, "and asked me to give it to you." Ethan folded the card carefully and slipped it into his chest pocket. "He's a good kid," he said softly. "You're a good dad." That spring, Sophie made a personal decision. She would step back even further from the company. Not quit. Not retire. But finally allow herself the space to be something she never thought she'd be again, present. Not just as a CEO, but as a mother, a partner, and a woman who didn't always have to lead. Ethan, now promoted to Chief Strategy Officer, took the reins with quiet confidence. Not because he wanted to prove himself anymore. He already had. But because he believed in the mission. Because he believed in what Sophie built and what they were now building together. Together, they created a scholarship program for young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. They launched a mentorship initiative for single parents trying to re-enter the workforce. Ethan always said, if someone hadn't given me a shot, I wouldn't be here. We can't forget that. Sophie just smiled. That's why I gave you a shot. Their house grew warmer, not bigger. They planted a tiny garden in the backyard and failed spectacularly at growing tomatoes. They started hosting weekly Sunday dinners, sometimes just the 3 of them, sometimes with neighbors, coworkers, or old friends. Leo got older. He stopped drawing as much, but he took an interest in coding. Ethan encouraged it. Sophie enrolled him in a STEM camp. They cheered him on at every talent show and science fair. At night, after the world quieted, Ethan and Sophie would sit on the back porch with mugs of tea or glasses of wine. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But always, they felt full. On the night of their small backyard wedding, just family, close friends, and a string of lights overhead. Leo stood between them in a bow tie, holding the rings. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he kept it short. "I didn't grow up believing in fate. I believed in work, in doing what you had to do to get by. But then I met Sophie, and Leo. And I realized, sometimes life hands you more than survival. Sometimes it hands you home." There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. After the ceremony, while guests laughed and music floated through the night, Leo pulled Ethan aside. "Dad? Yeah? Do you remember when I asked if you could be my dad?" "I do." Leo smiled. "Thanks for saying yes." Ethan hugged him tight. "Thanks for asking." Years later, when people asked Ethan how his life changed, he never said luck or timing. He said changed when I stopped wondering if I was enough and started choosing to become the man they already believed I was. Because in the end, love isn't something you stumble into. It's something you build, brick by brick, day by day. Not with grand gestures, but with groceries, school runs, burned pancakes, and early mornings. With showing up. With staying. With choosing your people. Again and again.